So for the last several weeks, we've been in this sermon series called Neighbors. And we've been talking about our neighbors. We started with that question, who is my neighbor? And we've been looking at different kinds of neighbors, different folks who are our neighbors. And we've mostly been using that bit from Matthew 25, where Jesus talks to some sheep and some goats, some people who he identifies that way to say, whatever you did to the least of these, you did this unto me. Who is my neighbor? It's the hungry and the thirsty and the naked. It's the sick. It's the stranger. It's the imprisoned. That imprisoned is a hard one for us to talk about because of what prison is. Prisons are things that we try to hide, and the imprisoned are people who we try to hide. So much so that we really don't spend a lot of time on the stories in Scripture about prison, about the criminal justice system such as it was. We get them here and there, but we always make the lessons about something else. Not so much about the fact of what is happening to these people in the Bible. And so as I thought about this sermon series, I was going through looking for those stories, searching them out, trying to get past the stories that we tell about them and focus on the stories. And I had to figure out which one we were going to look at this morning, but I do want to point out that there are a bunch in the Bible. We have the story of Joseph. He of the famous many-colored coat, or the pretty princess dress, depending on how you want to translate a couple words. He gets thrown in prison for being accused of trying to seduce the wife of his owner. And the Scripture isn't clear on whether he ever actually gets out of being imprisoned. He is released from the cell into the service of the Pharaoh. But he is still in that position. We have Moses. Moses does not go to prison. Moses murders someone and flees into the wilderness and makes a life as a fugitive until God tells him, go back to Egypt and lead a rebellion. We have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who live in exile, who refuse to worship their emperor, who are thrown into a fiery furnace, but who, of course, God makes sure are unharmed by those flames. We have Daniel, who very similarly, in the same book, in fact, gets thrown into a lion's den to die. And God shuts up the lions. Famously, we have Jesus. You probably all know this story. He is arrested. He is imprisoned. He is tried. He is executed by an empire. We have Peter in today's story, one of those followers of Christ, one of those Christians who are awfully suspect and who is thrown into prison. And we have Paul, who goes to prison for the same reason more than once, who ends his life under house arrest in Rome. Prison is part of Scripture. And many of those who God favors, many of those who are heroes of the story end up in prison. It is maybe so common. When I was In seminary or shortly after, when I was working for the seminary, we had a big conversation about whether students should have criminal background checks before they are admitted. And one of our professors, one of our brilliant theology professors, one of those people who is respected in both the school and internationally, said, we should probably have the criminal background checks. And then the students should be asked to explain themselves if they have never been arrested and imprisoned. It is, after all, scriptural to get in good trouble and to take the consequences of that. And I know all of the people who I just named are heroes of their stories. They more or less all get released in some way, shape, or fashion. But reading through those stories, if we were to take the time to read through each of them, we might possibly come to the conclusion that it just may be possible that God is possibly, probably, almost certainly, definitely a prison abolitionist. God does not look at humanity and say, yes, they belong in a cell. God gets people released from cells. God does not want anything to hem in those who bear God's image. God breaks down the walls that keep those who bear God's image inside. God breaks every chain that binds the human spirit. And that's a hard thing to imagine. A God who hates prison. A God who wants to abolish every cell. A God who wants to break every chain. But that is again and again in Scripture. That is again and again the work that God is doing. I know that because when we were bound by the chains of sin and death and everything that makes life less, when we were imprisoned in a terrible world, in a place where we could not move freely, where even our love was distorted and broken, God came into the world as one of us, as a fellow prisoner in the person of Jesus Christ, and started a rebellion against the powers of sin and death and everything that makes less, against the jailers, against those who were imprisoning us, and God showed us the way out. Even if that meant going to the cross and to the tomb and crawling through that tunnel to new life in a new world where nothing would ever bind us again. God is an abolitionist. But I know that's a lot. And it's certainly a lot to ask us to take that position. It's hard to imagine a world with no prisons. And certainly our reading today is not about a world with no prisons. Our reading today is about a Christian leader, a follower of Jesus, who went to prison, who was captured, who was chained, who was put in a cell, who was guarded by more guards than are probably necessary, and who then saw an angel, a messenger of God, who broke those chains and opened the doors and said, Peter, let's go. You're free now. It's an image that actually shows up for Paul too. When he is in prison, there is an earthquake, and the walls break open, and he could leave, and Paul, being Paul, says, if I get up and go and take my fellow prisoners with me, those guards will get in trouble. He probably knows what happened to the guards who were guarding Peter. So he stays. And they sing and they pray, and everyone is astonished that they are still in prison the next morning. But Peter is maybe a little more practical. Peter gets up and goes out. He heads to a friend's house, a safe house, someone who can keep him okay. He's got to let them know, and then he'll go to another place. If he keeps moving, they might notice he's gone, but they won't find him. And that will be okay. So he gets to this friend's house, and he knocks on the door, and then we get this beautiful sitcom moment. This is actually a trope. This is a thing that you find in Greek literature. It's a funny little joke that everybody knows how it goes. A maid runs to the door and answers the door and sees an important guest. Peter, it's you. This is amazing. This is great. And slams the door and runs back to the people to tell them that Peter is here. And everybody's left for that moment to go, okay, but where? You can extend the thing. In some literature, this is an ongoing bit, running back and forth, so excited at the arrival of this person that they completely forget to bring the person into the house. How often do we do that? How often are we amazed that someone has been released from prison, that we completely forget about the part where we welcome them back, when we bring them inside, when we care for them? I know that it is hard to visit someone in prison. If you know them, it's hard emotionally, but just logistically, it is hard. You have to be on the list, and you have to go during visiting hours, and visiting hours may or may not happen, and you've got to leave stuff in the car and show up with just what you're allowed to bring, and maybe you will be allowed in. It's hard to say. If you manage to get in, you go through the security, you do all the stuff, and you can talk but not touch. You might be in an open area to talk. You might be between glass to talk. It's not really human. It's not how we converse. It's not how we visit. It's different from a hospital or a home. It's all designed to make sure that everybody knows where they stand, that you know whether you are the prisoner or the visitor, that you know where you are, and you are in a prison, and you control nothing. You would think it would be easier to visit someone who has been imprisoned, to welcome someone who has been imprisoned, to greet someone who, in theory, supposedly, according to all of the law, has paid the price for whatever they have done. They have taken the punishment. Can we not celebrate? But so often we don't do that. So often someone who has been imprisoned is left on their own outside of prison, with no money and no place to go. Maybe they have some friends who will help them. Maybe, possibly, they have some family who will. But of course, you're not supposed to associate with the people who you knew before you went to prison, because that indicates you're falling back into the kind of life that you had before you were in prison. So if you're going to do that, be careful, and it's best not to, so don't have anyone. Don't go back to the same neighborhood and the same crowd. You're going to have to find a place to live. You're probably going to have to rent, and so you may have to check a box. And if that box says, I've been convicted of a felony, it's unlikely that you're going to get the place. You're going to need a job to pay rent, and so you go to the job, and depending on where you are, and different states are different, there might be a box. If you check that box, you're not going to get the job. So you end up exactly where you were before, maybe even worse off, looking for someone who will just pay you cash so that you can pay a landlord cash, so that you can rent the kind of apartment that a landlord rents to someone who doesn't have a credit history, who doesn't have resources, who is paying cash. And in all of that, you are somehow left on your own, just trying to get through so that you don't have to go back. At its worst, this can get you before you ever went to prison. An arrest can put you in jail for as long as it takes to get around to your trial, if you can't pay bail, or if none is assigned. You can, in that time, however long it lasts, lose your job because you're not showing up, lose your home because you can't pay the rent or the mortgage, lose your friends because you are in jail, lose your family because you are in jail, lose your connections because you are in jail. And then when you get out, how do you rebuild a life? This is a vexing question. This is maybe one of the hardest questions to ask, because it does make prison go on forever. Even once someone has left. Even if, unlike Peter, they served their time and did the work. Once someone has left, it's a bit of a gamble whether they will find a home, whether they will be welcomed back with open arms and a big hug. And yet we know. We know when we were bound by the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less, God came into the world as one of us, as a fellow prisoner, and broke every chain and showed us the way out. And went to the cross and to the tomb and to new life and invited us to follow, so that we could walk out of the world as it is into the world as God is calling it to be, so that we could no longer be prisoners to the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less, but children of the God who is love. And we know, and we'll read a story about this next week, we know that God welcomes us with open arms and with a big hug. That God says, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on life's journey, no matter what you have done, no matter who you have been, you are loved. And you are worthy of love, and God will love us. God will invite us into a reign of love. God will invite us to a humble feast. God will invite us into a kingdom that we can scarcely imagine, that we may not even be able to imagine, that may be so far beyond our imagining that we can only catch glimpses of it every now and again. But we know that we were welcomed home. We know that we were welcomed home. And so what can we do but welcome others? What can we do but say to someone who has gotten out of prison, you are loved and worthy of love, and we will love you. You are loved and worthy of love, and we will help you avoid all of the pitfalls that are now in your way. You are loved and worthy of love, and we will work for a world where you get the resources that you need to make a life out here in this place. You are loved and worthy of love, so we will make this place more hospitable to you. You are loved and worthy of love. And just maybe we will work for a world where prison is not the answer, but other forms of justice and restoration and reparation are sought. Because we have seen glimpses of that world. And having seen it, having been welcomed into it, we can work with God to make that world a reality for everyone. And oh my God, what a world that would be. A world in which we are all neighbors, caring for and supporting one another. Even those who, like us, have been cast aside and welcomed home again.